So I want to share with you something that happened with me yesterday. And I think it's a very interesting experience that I had. So as you know, Lorenzo, I use a copywriting framework. So what we've done is, after running hundreds and hundreds of experiments, we've identified like what are kind of just like, like a TV show producer, what gets the impact. And so we have a formula. Now, one of the inherent problems with a formula is that it can seem like everything is like, when you read the copy, it feels like, oh, all the spots are being hit. So what happened yesterday was, there was a client of ours, there is a client of ours, and we've come up with a bunch of concepts, and they haven't given us the green light yet to launch the experiments. And so we were wondering, like, okay, what is this delay? What's going on? And so we followed up with them, and they've said, oh, we're busy with stuff, and which might be true, but my thinking is that there might be something else over here. So yesterday we went on a call with the client, and we said, can you explain to us like what your concern is? Like, if there's any, oh, no, everything's fine. And then while we were having the conversation, the client kind of came up with this thought, like they said, listen, even if we were to run this experiment with this long form sales pitch and it were to win, we're really concerned about implementing it on our website, because what will our existing customers think about it? And also, like, she literally said it, they will come, it feels like a taboola outbrain ad, in the bottom of the thing.
Yeah.
And at first I was like very offended, I'm not offended, but I felt embarrassed. But then I leaned into it and I said, you're absolutely right. So I explained to her the process. And what we typically do is, this is one of the downsides of the first initial drafts. So there are two schools of writing copy. One school is to say, we will only launch what is perfection. And to me, perfection does not exist. I'll spend 20 years doing it. The other approach is to say that as we are improving the copy, we'll get to versions of it that are good enough to collect data. Because one of the things that I'm interested in as an experimenter is to understand what themes people care about. And I don't know that until I launch an experiment. And since I don't know that, there's a limitation on how much time I can spend refining each theme. And so what happens is, we launch the experiment, and then once we launch the experiment, we automatically reduce our sales pitch by 50%, because we know 50% of those things didn't work. And then we start what we call implied messaging. We kind of start pulling back the messaging so that it's not so obviously formulaic. Now the client doesn't know this. And so the client is only seeing the first raw cut and freaking out. And so I thought it was really, really interesting, because actually, surprisingly, even though it would seem like this is something that would be an objection all the time, this almost never comes up. So I thank the client profusely for bringing this to our attention, because I wouldn't have even thought about this being a point of friction. So now we are going to have to think about, like, how do we address this moving forward and set the right expectations. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, two thoughts. I wonder if this could be something that you can incorporate in the onboarding process, where you basically like question the client about how, let's say, like, I know sometimes, like, I remember being on a call with you and with a prospect, and one thing that came up from that conversation was, oh yeah, and it was through a partner, okay, through an agency partner. And one of the things that this person said was, well, actually, it takes a long time to get feedback about something from the client, because it has to go through like legal compliance. And I remember your instinct answer to that sentence to the person we were talking, like, okay, I'm not interested in working with this client. So do you remember that conversation? Yeah. So for me, it's almost like it should be part of the onboarding process and kind of like the discovery call, like, how much taste there is to test kind of like strong, I wouldn't say opinionated messaging, but like stronger voices and less politically correct.
Correct.
It's not the right word. And based on that, you can have like approach number one, right? Where it's like, for brands and companies that are okay with having a strong opinion about whatever selling point you're focusing on. And then number two is a little bit politically correct selling points, right? Which you can argue also that maybe more politically correct, and maybe again politically correct is not the right word I'm using, but less opinionated and less strong points are probably like also like maybe less effective, no?
Yeah, no, that's right. And I
So,
think it's
so
all about setting. In fact, I personally think that this kind of discussion is very healthy because
mhm,
because the client was understood they even said that even if it wins, so they're not having doubt about it
yeah.
winning. So this tells me that, okay, so we need to like really kind of explain to them the context of why we are testing this. And I thought it was very useful. I'm really grateful that the client actually brought this up. Oftentimes people don't, and this is one of the other problems, goes going back to research, is that people don't actually communicate. So this just came up organically. Typically what clients will say is, I'm busy, oh, this is not going to work for us, and then the project kind of tapers off. But in this case, we we really kind of had that conversation, and I think we're going to have a better product because, and now it's given me so much more context. Like, okay, we need to be sensitive, because remember, the client, as much as we're trying to convert the end user, the client is also an audience. And the client has a much better instinctive understanding of their audience because they talk to them every day. So you have to integrate their feedback and kind of figure out, like, how do I get the same psychological impact, but I want to do it in a way that's on brand for them.
Here's another thought about this. So, especially if you start working with like brands that are more up market, like if tomorrow Dyson comes to you and tells you, Rishi, you know what, we're gonna hire you, right? I mean, I strongly believe that you're gonna have to compromise about a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Because again, they probably have like a compliance team, a legal team that has to review every single letter that is being published on the website.
Well, the client also brought up another point that I think is especially relevant for Dyson, is that the point was that we are touching our customers through direct mail. We are touching our customers through advertising. So it creates inconsistency, and which is a valid point. And so there are certain challenges with testing drastically different ideas because we are living in an ecosystem,
But this is, I'm gonna build on the top of what you just said. I think this is also an opportunity to tell the client, maybe not in this case, maybe like in any other case where the client is okay with, trying a stronger, point of view, is that there should be like, if an experiment showed that X messaging works for on-site people, the same messaging should be tested for direct mail, for all the other channels,
That's exactly right. And I want to add something to this as well, is that one of the things that I brought up in the call was I told the client, I said, let's do a hypothetical. Let's say that your conversion rate is 4%. We ran this experiment and now the conversion rate is 5%. I said, if we as a brand really care about helping people discover and experience our product for the very first time, we have a responsibility. What the data is showing us is that there were 1% of people that were interested but didn't buy because they didn't hear what we had to say. So in a way, you're actually increasing the size of the pie. It's
totally.
So that was, and yeah, that's true as well. And so I think it's all about like having conversations, setting expectations. But the worst thing that a marketer can do, and I think this might be an important lesson for someone listening, is to immediately give up, is to immediately cave in. This does two things. Number one is it communicates to the client that you didn't really believe in your idea in the first place. And number two, you are regressing to the mean, because the safest thing for the client to do is to have the marketing message be very similar to what they've been doing historically. But if you have something very similar to what they were doing historically, then the probability of getting test winner is close to zero. So in a way, you're actually underserving your client by doing exactly what they were doing. And so for that reason, I think it's really important to stand up, don't have to be disrespectful, and explain your point of view. And the thing about testing is that if we run an experiment, Lorenzo, and it's been 3 days and I look at the day by day data, Monday, it was 10% worse. Tuesday, it was 20% worse. Wednesday, it was 10% worse. I can just pause the test. I don't have to wait for significance for bad results, right? And so I can reassess.
Yeah, I think in general, understanding upfront, before you start working with the client or right after, the first onboarding call, and having those expectations super upfront helps you also be a little bit more efficient in the work, right? Because maybe like you spent 30 hours creating the sales pitch with this strong point of view, and then you're like, oh my god, I just spent 30 hours. They could have been like 15 hours because they, maybe like they were okay with a more politically correct point of view, but I just spent 30 hours. I could have avoided.
That's really interesting. I'm going to give you another counterpoint to that, actually. So
please.
This is important, actually. I actually think what I've learned is that when people have conversations in abstract terms, clients are not able to visualize. So they might actually shoot down the concept. And sometimes when they see the final version, they're like, oh, I get it now. So I do think there's some value in showing them, but you're right. Don't spend 30 hours doing it. Maybe do it in 10 hours.
This is why you're absolutely right. You and I spoke about this thousands of times. One of the most common questions that you get separately, I get separately, and I even get on LinkedIn is, give me an example of what you just said, or give me an example of what you're suggesting, or give me an example of somebody that is doing it, right? Because obviously, I think there's two things that are playing here. One is like, if somebody else is doing it, I feel safer, right? Almost. And the second one is it helps visualize, as you said, like understand, because you're a master at this. Visuals help sell something, a concept. I'm not even talking about product pages here. I'm talking about like
ideas,
any type of communication, right? Communication
Absolutely.
is selling.
Absolutely.
So,
no, this is awesome. Well, good chatting about this.